Welcome to the Noon Dish. I'm your host, Tommy Ashley, sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com. That is Don Callahan. It's been a while, Don. We were just talking before we went live. I guess December 20th was the last time we did one of these. That's like, what, 20 days ago? 21 days ago?
Oh, it's more. Yeah.
It's 3 weeks ago, I
3 weeks ago. Well, we were going to be on together a week ago, but you kicked me off. I
No,
went.
you
I
wanted
went
out.
kicking and screaming.
Don't make me call you out. Had a little bit of news going down last
Literally,
Wednesday
what was
about
it, like
this.
an hour before?
Yeah, it was breaking news. So we got together with the El Jefe and Jason Staples to discuss the coaching moves that at the time North Carolina had made. So a hectic time last week. Noon Dish suffered. Well, Noon Dish didn't suffer. Your appearance on your own show suffered. That's
Yeah.
probably accurate. But it is
I
back.
thought about crashing the party.
You could have. I asked you to. And I mean, it is relevant. And when I look on the Inside Carolina message boards, I see a weekly scoop, and I see you discussing the recruiting impact of the
Well,
coaching changes. And
the
that's
the if we were going to make this into a pie, right? As far as like the fan base, the consideration, and actually even the decisions that went into making that, the decisions to part ways with Tim Cross, bring in Monachino, part ways with Gene Chizik, and then eventually, because at that point he hadn't been hired, but bring in Collins. The recruiting aspect, I feel like, is a very small piece. Where maybe 25%. I think. I mean, Mac Brown wasn't making those decisions with recruiting strongly in mind. I mean, recruiting always has to be on mind to some degree. So, but yes, the weekly scoop does cover my thoughts on those moves purely from a recruiting perspective. You get a chance to check that out?
I did 100%.
Good.
I read all your stuff. Do you listen to all my shows?
I do not.
See, this is a one-sided relationship. I'm used to that kind of stuff. It is, I'm used to it, so I deal well with it. Preston shouts you out. You were missed last week. No, you weren't. Didn't miss Don at all. Never miss Don when he's
Yeah, you
not
guys
here.
didn't have a top five.
No top five.
You should have let Jason pick the top five. That could have been interesting.
We were on a time crunch. All right, And speaking of time, so our time. It's a perfect segue to our time. Oh, excuse me, to our top five this week, and we'll do this after our guest joins us in the middle of the show. But top five things that you will do now that college football season is over.
Because of the extra time.
Because you have plenty of extra time.
Yeah.
And so that's your top five, folks. If you're watching, shout out to the folks in the chat already. Top five things you will do with your time now that college football season is over and does not start back until officially games the last weekend in August. Don, let's sort of talk about what has happened since you and I last talked on signing day.
Oh, we need to talk about our guest.
Yeah, let me, and I'll do that. Let me give a shout out to Don because he texted me earlier in the week and says, "Do we want to get this guy as a guest? Because was at all the All-Star games or knows all about the All-Star games, high school All-Star games."
Well, he was at all of them, all the main ones that we care about.
And that we care about. How many are there these days? Anyway, no, I digress. Andrew Ivins, 24/7's director of scouting, will join us shortly. And Andrew and Don and myself will talk about the Under Armour Bowl, the All-American Bowl, and the Shrine Bowl that more than a handful of North Carolina recruits participated in over the last couple of weeks or over the last month or so. Certainly relevant discussions there as North Carolina signing day class that we talked about on the 20th is basically 90% of them, 85% of them started classes in Chapel Hill today. So it is a relevant discussion with Andrew. We'll get to him shortly. But Don, first, before Andrew joins us, I want us to talk about the transfer portal.
Okay.
It has made your job tougher. It has made your job more hectic. It has made your job a never-ending thing where it's kind of like tax season, right? Once April 15th rolls around, CPAs get a break. Once signing day would roll around, Don Callahan would get a little bit of a break. No longer. What's going on with the portal, my man?
Yeah, so the big thing right now is today is the first day of the spring semester at UNC. And the reason why that's significant is that in order for a transfer to participate in spring practice, which is the preference for UNC staff and for most staffs, I would imagine, is to get these transfers in for spring practice for obvious reasons. Obviously, they can. What is? I think it's Wednesday. I think of next week is the last day for late registration. I believe. Tommy, you would know this stuff better than I would.
No, because my children are on time.
Oh,
And
gotcha.
I think you're right, though. I think it's sometime late next week.
Yeah. So, but most of the guys who are going to make decisions have already made decisions. There will obviously be some guys who UNC is going to be looking to try to bring in for the summer, but really this is kind of like I guess a somewhat of a deadline sort of thing. And so I don't remember exactly what has happened. I imagine there was at least, I think, 2 commitments since our signing day show, but right now we're standing at, I'm talking about transfers. We're standing at 5 transfer commitments, and there is at least Darwin Barlow, Southern Cal running back transfer, who officially visited North Carolina last week, over the weekend. He's kind of out there, still hasn't made his decision. So there's a potential for a 6th. We have hinted at another. I'll leave that for the weekly scoop to kind of to get the details on that. Also, the Monday portal scoop that probably covers it a little bit more in detail, that situation, but the weekly scoop gives a little bit of an update. So anyway, so I'm sure you're more interested in talking about the 5 who are actually committed. Correct?
Yeah, yeah. I'm a once they show up on campus, let's talk about them type of guy. And
well, in a lot of these situations, I would imagine most of these guys are on campus now.
yeah, absolutely. So, and just for planning purposes or viewing purposes for folks watching this show, Don covers all of them. Once they get to Chapel Hill, it goes over to other folks. And if folks remember last year, Jason Staples put together scouting reports on each transfer, and he and I did accompanying or buddy videos analysis from Jason that go along with those transfer scouting reports. So hopefully we'll be able to get those done ahead of spring practice. So that'll be something to look forward to. Interesting note, last year, all but one of North Carolina's transfers was on campus for spring. So that's a relevant discussion. Stick Lane wanted to get
when
that.
He had to enroll, he had to graduate from Georgia State in order to transfer, and so that would happen in May. And so there are some situations, we won't get into it here, but there are some situations where North Carolina is dealing with recruits who are in similar situations.
Yeah, and so you've got that going on too as well. But let's get into real quick, just sort of update people on the 5 that should be or on campus today as classes start for North Carolina. I'll let you run it down, and if you want to put them in any particular order, I'd like to see it, but I would think most folks are going to say Max Johnson, quarterback from Texas A&M, that is assumed to battle Connor Harrell this spring, would be number 1 on your list.
So I'm putting them in order of.
You do them in order however you want.
Okay, I'm just going to list them. I think this is an order of when they actually committed. Yes, I think it is. So Max Johnson, quarterback from Texas A&M. I think we have talked about him a little bit. He was the first one. He committed before the portal window actually even opened. So he's, as you mentioned, he's coming in to compete for the starting quarterback job that was left vacant by Drake May's departure. We have I'll go a little bit out of order from this. His brother, Jake Johnson, tight end. He's a tight end from Texas A&M, was the number 1 tight end in his class as a recruit. He's dropped a little bit, I think, with the high school. I'm sorry, with the transfer rankings, but tight end was not a need necessarily for North Carolina, but a talent like this is what you kind of deal with the portal. It doesn't always have what you want, and sometimes it has things that you don't necessarily need, but you kind of just take it because you don't want to turn it down. That's the situation with Jake Johnson. Then we have Austin Blasky. He was a guy who offensive lineman. He was a guy who competed for the left tackle spot at Georgia and lost that battle. But the guy that he lost it to was like a top 50 recruit for his class. So he's a guy who's going to absolutely compete for playing time along the offensive line, can play a bunch of different positions. And then Jakeem Harris was a Christmas Day announcement. He was one of the secret official visitors. I think now that he's out there, he's an NC State guy, a former NC State guy. You know, he has a safety. Knowing he's from a rival, you can see why it was difficult to kind of find out information on this. But he committed to North Carolina on Christmas. For those who have followed North Carolina, they know safety is an absolute need. So he provides some experience there. All these guys, we have in-depth breakdowns throughout the past, I guess, month or so. So check that stuff out for more details. We obviously have limited time here to talk about everything. And the last guy who actually was a bit of a surprise over the weekend, Howard Sampson. If you've been following this, you know he took official visits to UNC, TCU, then decided on TCU. He's from Texas, so that makes sense. He played for Coach Clements at North Texas. Obviously, that relationship played a big role in him initially considering North Carolina. But he picked TCU. That relationship he held on to throughout that, I guess, commitment span. And then along that time, TCU picked up 4 other offensive linemen through the portal. Meanwhile, North Carolina lost Diego Pounds. So obviously the playing time situation became much more appealing in Chapel Hill. And then you also have a position coach that you're familiar with. So he actually, he said, I talked to him. We have a Q&A up on him on Monday, this past Monday. So you can check out what he exactly said. But essentially he started to kind of reconsider some things, and he made the flip official on Sunday.
It's interesting. A Texas guy, North Texas, and Tyrann Stewart, of course, the junior college guy that is part of North Carolina's recruiting class that we've talked about as well. But Barlow, the Southern Cal running back, is also from Texas and has Carolina and UTSA on the list. Interesting that Texas has become a pipeline for North Carolina as well. Anything left on the portal scoop as we have
there is a good question in there. I don't know if you saw. I can't.
Any Tez Walker-ish issues? Is that
so? Currently they have, I guess, temporarily lifted this rule about the second-time transfers being you have to sit out or whatever. It was like almost a year ago. I got in a back and forth on the message boards about how I thought that this second-time rule thing was never going to stick because it was going to fall apart just like the first-time transfer rule did. And there was a lot of pushback from some posters. But here we are. There's just no way once the courts get involved. I shouldn't say no way. But I can't see how once the courts get involved that this will stick as far as the transfer portal stuff. But as of right now, any second-time transfers who aren't grads are allowed to play immediately. Now, I mean, who knows if something gets put in place for, I don't know. But as of right now, it shouldn't be an issue. A lot of these guys, from my understanding, are either graduates or it's their first time transferring. So even if that rule was still in place, it won't be an issue.
It's an interesting thing. I mean, it is a free-for-all in college football now. And, there for a while, and we're going to talk high school recruiting here when Andrew joins us, but once in a while, shortly ago, if you got a transfer, you had a transfer.
Mm-hmm.
And you had them for some period of time because they had used that one free one. Now with that rule and that injunction or whatever they called it, and now the NCAA is allowed, I believe is still in effect, allowed basically freedom of movement no matter what. And certainly has gotten into the free agency during the season type deal that's going on with college football now. I'm going to bring in Andrew here. He appears ready. I know he can hear me. Andrew, what's going on, my man?
I'm doing good, guys. Yeah. You guys are mentioning things are changing. I think we saw that with the All-Star games. A lot of players not participating like we thought they would, had to kind of work our way down the list. It'll be interesting to see just with the NIL, the race to get to college, kids in bowl practices, what these all-star games look like in the next few years.
So
Yeah, I'm gonna
yeah,
let Don. I'm gonna let Don introduce you fully, but I want to ask you a question. So you're saying we had opt-outs in high school All-American games now?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the All-American Bowl. First 6 quarterback invites, all of them ended up turning it down at the end, and the primary reason why is because they wanted to get to those bowl practices. But I can remember when every single one of those invites went out, and it was a massive deal at the time. And it's just times have changed, right? And with the college football playoff expanding to 12 teams next year, I mean, who knows what it will look like. You used to want to play on NBC. You used to want to announce your commitment on NBC. But that is no longer the case.
and it seems like to me that would help, I guess, your brand being, but I don't know. A lot of these kids have other advisors who are way smarter than I am with this sort of stuff, making those decisions. So, but let me introduce Andrew, who's been on the podcast before. So if you're a regular on the podcast, you know who Andrew is. Director of Scouting at 24/7 Sports. What exactly is the Director of Scouting for those who are unfamiliar?
I'm in charge of our high school rankings, right? So I lead up our team. We got national analysts around the country. We got regional guys, team site guys. I'm the one kind of with the vision. I think you could compare it little to, a guy heading up a college recruiting department, a GM at a level, at the next level, just kind of steering our rankings because it's a process. I think, Don, you've used the term in the past. It's a bit of an art, what we're going to value. And our rankings are always going to reflect the NFL draft because that's when we're measured the most, right? The NFL kind of runs America. So if we got, our top 2, 4, 7, we're saying, hey, that's a future NFL pick. Our top 32, 32 5-stars. That reflects a first round pick. So I'm in charge of all that, and it's a juggle, especially just with how the accelerated the recruiting calendar has become. We've already turned the page to 2025 and 2026s and whatnots. So that's what I do. I'm based in Florida. So I'm in one of the more fruitful grounds, but I'm out there all around the country, whether it be camps, high school games, or, these 2 all-star games, the Under Armour game, the All-American Bowl was also at the Shrine game. And we had representation at the Alabama-Mississippi game. And we'll have guys out in Hawaii next week for the Poly Bowl.
And that's why we kind of brought you on. North Carolina was well represented at all of these games. The first I wanted to get to is one that's kind of near and dear to me, the Shrine Bowl. I mean, I was going to this because of the reasons you kind of mentioned. I was going to this for, I don't know. I mean, like 20 years. I think the last one I went to was the 2019 one with Sam Howell because of the opt-outs and also because kids are already decided by this point. So it's a great evaluation situation. But for me, the valuation is part of my job, but it's a small slice compared to the transfer portal, which is going on, and these last minute decisions and all this. So anyway, so I haven't been the last couple of years, and I love spending I guess a week in Spartanburg. There's only like 5 places to eat, and so, but they're good. Where did you go to eat, by the way?
Oh man, I was on like.
Did you go to Beacon?
I ended up at one of the recommended places. It was like Monday night, and it was a dive bar, and it was locals only. And I think there was a lot of people wondering what I was doing in that. I tried to get out there as fast
Chiefs?
as I could.
Was it Chiefs?
Maybe I can't remember.
Okay.
I can't remember off the top of my head. But fun town. It's an interesting town.
Yes, it's definitely
Interesting.
Interesting
Is the right
southern
word.
town. So the 2 guys from North Carolina that were in the Shrine Bowl, Curtis Simpson and Janai Norwood. Let's start with Janai, because I think the biggest question for him, for at least for me, is the position he plays in college. I know in the Shrine Bowl, I guess he started at right tackle in the game. Where do you, just kind of what you saw from him, what do you think his future position is?
Well, I think he could be a right tackle, but I kind of view him as more of an interior guy. I was only there Monday and Tuesday of practices. Ended up watching the game from back home. I thought he was impressive. I thought he moved well. And you kind of touched on it. This game has changed a little bit in terms of, all right, everyone used to want to represent the Carolinas.
Mm-hmm.
Now it seems like they almost have to beg some of these kids to be in there. But I thought of the pool of offensive linemen. He was kind of one of the top guys, instant eye catcher. I love his basketball background. He plays some basketball. He's an athletic individual. I view him as more of an interior player. I think he's a guy that could potentially start in the ACC. Now it's probably going to be, hey, 2-3 years of development before he's ready to go, but big functional athlete. And I think if you're North Carolina, that's kind of what you're looking for, what you want to take at that position, especially in this era with the transfer portal. Yes, you can go get veteran linemen, maybe from some of the lower levels, but it's so hard. I mean, because you're battling everyone for those. So to me, I think it makes as much sense as you can to stockpile, that mass and the guys that can move. And I think Norwood is just that. And if you're North Carolina, hey, you didn't have to get into some huge battle maybe with some of these other schools for a blue chipper. Yeah, you want to try to get the blue chip lineman, but finding local kids, developmental upside, I think that's a perfect strategy for them.
No, yeah, that's a bit. Go ahead, Tommy.
Let me ask a question here, Don, and pay attention to your slack, like we were talking about.
My bad.
Andrew, when you're looking at these guys in high school, how do you sort of project whether they're offensive or defensive linemen? I've always thought that was interesting because a lot of people talk about, Norwood makes great defensive line plays, but as a guy that evaluates these young men, when you're looking at them, how do you sort of project them out on either side of the ball?
It can. I mean, some of these athletes, and I know you're asking about the big boys up front, but man, we keep going back and forth about some of these cream of the crop guys. Some analysts are dead set on he's an offensive guy. Some guys, we will think he's a defensive guy, like Terry Bussey. He's a kid that's going to sign with Texas A&M. We still can't figure out where he's going to play, but we know that we want him on our team. I think with the O-line, D-line, it's a little bit more unique. Now, if you look at NFL draft trends, right, the guys getting selected, you go back to this 2023 NFL draft, one thing you'll notice with the offensive linemen, a lot of them two-way snaps as high schoolers, and they're productive as seniors. I mean, getting to the quarterback. So that's something we kind of always look for. We'll lean on, hey, where do the schools kind of see them? Where are they recruiting him? Because we want to list them where they're probably going to play in college. And it's rare. I mean, you're never going to see us listing a kid over 215 pounds as an athlete. Like that's just not going to happen. Now, we'll maybe throw on the profile, hey, he could play, either side of the ball. But for the offensive lineman, I think what we're looking for, how do they react? Reactionary. I think that's important. And with the big boys, I think sometimes we get so caught up in, all right, what do they look like technically? Hey, are they ready to go? And I try to tell our guys all the time, they're going to get coached up. Give me some stuff that they can't do. What's the size? How do they move? How do they distribute that weight? So it's all a projection. It's not an exact science. I think anyone that sits up here and says, hey, we're going to get it right every single time is lying to themselves. You're going to miss. So we try our best. But really for those offensive linemen, I think it's how can they recover, can they bend? Because I think it's a little bit more rare to find that them working in reverse than some of those pass rushers going forward.
Yeah. And so the other guy who also played in the Shrine Bowl was Curtis Simpson, who I didn't watch fully, but I watched bits and pieces of it. I thought he should have been defensive MVP. He had a sack, a really nice sack. He had an interception. He was also, I think he finished third in tackles. The guy who won the defensive MVP was Don Callahan, who I'm a fan of for obvious reasons. And I think he had 9 tackles and he had like a kick return or whatever. But I mean, anybody, Andrew, when you're up in those press box, those guys just look at the guy who had the most tackles, and that's the defensive MVP, which is kind of foolish, but whatever. Anyway, so what did you think of Simpson? Because I know that when you and I have spoken before, you really wanted to kind of get some eyes on him to see his frame and that sort of thing.
Yeah, he's kind of he's a tweener, right? But and tweeners sometimes gets a negative connotation. People are like, oh, I don't like that. I think when you're building out a college roster, and you see it even now, on Sundays in the NFL, like tweeners are in. And Curtis Simpson, his measurables aren't maybe where you want them to be. I think he was 6'2" and change, roughly 200 pounds back in the spring, with 31-inch arms, right? So he kind of lacks the length. With that being said, I mean, his ability to get after the quarterback, it stands out. Like, that is what he can do. And then you see him in the game, you see him in the practices, and I thought him dropping back into space in coverage, didn't really see that on tape. So that's certainly a plus. I view him as kind of a versatile, second level defender. It's going to depend on how big, how much weight can they put on him, and really what North Carolina's vision is for him. But he was one of my favorite players out there. And then I agree with you. I think he had 6 tackles. So I think he was like the 3rd leading tackler of that game. And when I saw the MVP award, I was kind of scratching my head. But no, I like him. I think 46 tackles or 46 sacks, excuse me, in the past 3 years. That's what you want to see, an ascending player heading into high school. I think Curtis Simpson is that. I think it was a good evaluation by North Carolina early on. I know we had him listed in the rankings as like an athlete. I went ahead and flipped him over to edge. Yeah. And, we're still kind of buttoning it up some things. It's not the ideal world. Like, yeah, these guys have signed and now you're kind of still tweaking things. But the reality is, there's only so many hours in the day, and things have gotten so sped up that we got to kind of, we got to play catch up. And these all-star events, again, they've signed, but that live exposure is so important. So we're getting one more final rankings update later this month. I think Curtis Simpson's a guy that maybe could move up a little bit in that 3-star range. Measurables will be the knock, but his skill set, I can kind of see the big picture playing with him.
So, Andrew, when you look at him, obviously, and Preston in chats, one of our regulars mentions Kamon Rucker. It sounds like he's got some of that in him as far as on the high school level from Simpson. Do you see that as it's maybe a player comp, or are you like Don? You won't do player comps because
I do player comps.
I love player comps if they work. Yeah, I can see a little bit of that. I think with Curtis Simpson, again, you get him in the strength program, right? Figure out is he a hard gainer? What can we put on him? He's a basketball kid, so you're playing 20, 30 basketball games in the winter months. It gets hard for those kids to put on weight. Yeah. It gets hard to get them in the weight room. I think situational rusher early on, and then you just try to expand his palette. Like, what can he do? Can he drop back in certain situations, which we saw again in the Shrine Bowl. So yeah, I kind of like that comp. I haven't had a chance to dig into him as much as I want. I think that's going to be in the coming weeks. We had that mid-senior season eval. They come back to him. So hopefully I can find one.
My player comp for Simpson was Malachi Hamrick, and maybe that's more of they both play in the same county, again, for rival schools or whatever, but both were long, skinny guys. Now Hamrick was probably used more of like a kind of like a defensive weapon at Shelby High School, moved around a bunch, where Simpson's more just kind of, they put him on the edge or sometimes inside and just say, get to the quarterback sort of thing. But anyway, Tommy. So moving along with the All-Star games, let's just go Under Armour. Davion Gause, he had a touchdown run. I think he had a few other carries in the game. But what did you kind of see from him? Anything new? Because I just felt like I kind of saw the same stuff from his career, high school career.
Yeah, and I think with these high school games, I mean, the hardest positions to evaluate when you're there is those kind of like mid skills, right? So your linebackers, your running backs, and you can even put the tight ends in that category. I mean, the Under Armour game is, I kind of call it like the Pro Bowl.
Yes.
And maybe the All-American Bowl is closer to the Senior Bowl, but we only got like 2 real days of competition at Under Armour. I mean, it's never full contact. It's just thud up, and then you get the game, and the D line always seems to be much better than the offensive line. And I think, that has to do with the practice schedule, but it's also, they do an excellent job of getting the premium pass rushers to these games. I thought it was more of the same. 6 for 27. And you said that touchdown. I think he was the second leading rusher. I think Peyton Lewis maybe had 29 yards off the top of my head. Gause, to me, I think kind of a change of pace back, but I think he fits, the ACC. I mean, if you wanted him to be a workhorse, if you needed to feed him touches, yeah, he could do it. But I think his ideal role, is that short yardage, third and 4, 3rd and 5. He's a good between the tackles. The knock on him is going to be that top end gear. What happens when he gets into the second level? Maybe not as elusive as some of these other guys in the class, but I think he can be a guy in the ACC, and he's coming out of a great program, Chaminade Madonna Prep. I mean, I think they won their 3rd or 4th straight title, and he ran for a ton of yards as a youngster. He was a star in the youth leagues, and then at Chaminade Madonna, they had 2 really good receivers, Jeremiah Smith, our number 1 ranked player in the country, and Josiah Trader, another top 100 guy. So they wanted to throw the football, but when they leaned on him, he certainly could produce.
I know you're not in the weeds with UNC, but so basically, you have Omarion Hampton, and then from there you have Caleb Hood, who's always been injured, and there's not a whole lot else. They hope to bring in a transfer running back, but that hasn't materialized yet. So obviously, there is an opportunity for Gause. How ready is he?
I think he's someone that could, year one, right? Again, do you want him starting a game? I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
What does he look like in pass protection? I think is an area, he's going to have to soak up that coaching, but physically, he's on the bigger side, still not exactly chiseled. So they're going to have to get the body right. But you look at college football, we saw it last season, we saw it this past season, running backs can play right away. That is the one position, if you're looking for a freshman to be ready to go, running back is it. I think 2 years ago, PFF, their top 10 graded freshmen, 6 of them were true freshman running backs. And there was a ton that did much of the same. You had, Darius Taylor at Minnesota, Cedric Baxter at Texas. I think for sure, he could be in the committee. And then as the season progresses, right, he gets his feet more wet, injury bug starts biting. For sure, I could see him on the field there.
The last guy from Under Armour, Zion Ferguson. To be honest, I don't remember seeing him. I tried to look for him on defense, but it's so hard. They don't pass the ball to his side. You're not going to see it. Did you take away anything from the game with him or the practices with him?
Yeah, so we got to see a bunch of him in practices, extended one-on-one sessions. I think my takeaway on Zion, okay, he's got some length to him, right? And I thought that at check-in, I mean, I don't know, 6 foot maybe, or I should say at least 6 foot. So that's what you want on the perimeter. Went up against some of these blue chip receivers, kind of struggled in one-on-ones. But I think with him, off man is not his jam. I mean, you got to get him in that press man situation,
Mm-hmm.
let him use his hands.
Mm-hmm.
I think kind of a boundary roll, bump and run is going to suit him best, where he's got some safety help over the top. So I think the size is there. Correct me if I'm wrong. He went through bowl practices. Am I right on that?
He was there, but did he actually practice, Tommy?
Yeah, I'm not sure that.
Okay.
If they did, it was in shorts. And
Yeah. Okay.
T-shirt, so.
He had mentioned I think we were talking about that, but I think he's kind of a project. The biggest thing with him is he's got that size. Picked off 5 passes as a senior. I think 8 over the past two seasons. So, probably going to need a developmental year or 2, but I would view him as more of a press man guy that you can try to match him up with some of the bigger targets that are going to be out on the perimeter.
Okay. Then moving on to the All-American Bowl. Let's go with the I guess, quote unquote, easier one, which would be the offensive lineman, Andrew Rosinski. Another situation where I didn't catch a whole lot of glimpses of him during the game, but I'm hoping that you probably saw some stuff in practice with him.
Yeah, so he was a late invite for
Mm-hmm.
us. We were searching long and hard to get some of these bodies in here. Rosinski was a guy we were excited to see. Listed as a tackle. Still think he could be maybe a right tackle, but also could see him on the inside.
Okay.
They listed him as the number 2 center for the East team. That's what he was on
really?
as the official depth chart. They were, the guy ahead of him, Cooper Cousins, headed to Penn State. I mean, he was awesome. But we saw him at guard, we saw him at center. Not sure if we got any of those tackle reps.
Okay.
Not as big as maybe we were hoping in terms of the weight. Came in at 263 pounds when he came through our room and we measured him, but he was over 6'4". He's got 33-inch arms, so that's a plus. That's a plus. I think it's going to be a longer burn with him. Kind of day one, got his teeth kicked in a little bit. Again, you're looking at the collection of pass rushers that were at these games. I mean, some of these guys, they've never really done one-on-one. So, we're not going to kill someone for that. And I thought he rebounded well. He was one of the more, believe it or not, like vibrant personalities in the hotel on the sidelines. Was not expecting that in any way from Rosinski. So we're fans of him. I think the big thing is he's going to need some time. And we kind of knew that coming into the game. I mean, he is not day one or year one, year two. Get him on the roster. And I think what also kind of stood out, his ability to get to that second level. And yes, he's on the lighter side, but he should be able, to eventually get to 280, 290 and relatively easily.
Now, linebacker Ashton Woods had an interception in the game. I read some of the write-ups during practices where I guess someone, it might have been you, said it was fortunate for some of the players during 7-on-7s that it wasn't tackle, because I guess Ashton was in position to kind of clean someone's clock. What were your kind of thoughts on him and just his prospects for North Carolina?
Yeah, I think big takeaway with him is you love him between the ears in terms of like instincts, ability to key and read and get where he needs to be. And you look at what he did as a senior there for Walton High School, which played for a state title and Georgia's highest classification. I mean, 20 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, over, well over 100 tackles. He just kind of gets to the football. What did we have him at? He was just under 6'3", 221 pounds, worked at weak side linebacker. I don't know what maybe the Sunday ceiling is with him, but I think he could be a really, really good college player, especially in the ACC. I mean, I get the take absolutely for North Carolina. I mean, a guy that, again, you look at the high school program he's coming out of, he had a solid showing in San Antonio against, alongside some of the top players in the nation. I thought he was kind of one of the surprises of the week, if I'm being honest.
Andrew, let me ask you a question about level of competition in high school. This is a big thing that I've always talked about with Don. I know the camp season and the All-American games and all is a big part of it, but sort of speak to level of competition from high school, the high school level, especially the Georgia kids or whatever, versus where you see a guy dominate at a lesser program versus a guy that has done it for 3 or 4 years at a big-time high school program.
Yeah, that's always the that's the difficult one in terms of, right, so you take a program like Walton or maybe some of these other powers around the country. A lot of times these guys are waiting their turn behind some seniors that are going to end up signing with Power 5 schools. Competition, you can't control it. I mean, you're going to find some guys in different parts of the country, and you just kind of roll the dice. Hey, are they doing what a guy dominating that competition should be doing? And we see it. The guy that won MVP of the All-American Bowl was from a town of 2,000 people in Minnesota, and day one, day two, he struggled. I was like, why did we invite this kid? And he was kind of my guy. And then when the lights turned on, he shined the brightest. So, you try to weigh it out. I don't think it's the end all be all, but then when you can get these guys alongside some of the other, quote unquote blue chippers, it allows you to stack and rack them. With a guy like Ashton Woods, I think in this era, right, with all the player movement, you want to find, if you're building out a roster, you want to find individuals that, have come from programs where they've lifted weights, they've done all those extra things and they're coming and they're going to be ready to go, because, it's so easy now for these kids to leave that aren't invested, that aren't bought into the process. And, Ashton Woods coming from Marietta, like he's going to be there he's going to be a program guy. And I think those individuals are as valuable as ever, just with where roster construction has become. I mean, 30 new faces every year, 30 faces leaving. So I don't know if I really answered your question, but that's certainly something that stands out when you think of a program like, okay, Walton or maybe some of these other powerhouses out there around the country.
No, I mean, what you say is relevant too, because if you come from a powerhouse high school program and you've had to wait your turn to play, you're more likely to want to understand the value in that in college as well, rather than jumping as soon as you realize you're not going to be on the too deep or at the top of the depth chart. So, yeah, I think it's relevant. Don, you've got one more guy to ask Andrew about.
I saved the best for last. I know Andrew has to get out of here. Jordan Shipp. Anyone who follows me know I've been a huge Jordan Shipp fan for several years, and I was so happy that it seemed like every single day in practice there was buzz about him. He had a pretty good game during the game. What were your thoughts? Any chance he moves up in these rankings?
Yeah, there's a chance he's going to move up. We loved him. Look, the wide receiver class, we've been saying it all cycle. Like, this is a loaded group. I mean, it is so loaded. I think of our 20 top ranked receivers, we saw 19 of them either at the Under Armour game or at the All-American Bowl. And Jordan right now in our rankings is not in that top 20, but he was one of our favorites. He was alpha dog of Wednesday, which was when we had that joint practice. So the East and the West got together inside the Alamo Dome. They did one-on-ones and they did like a team scrimmage, kind of rotating quarterbacks. It was the best we got out of both these games. The competition, it was ramped up. You could feel the energy, and Jordan Shipp just kind of took over. Came in just over 6'2", 190 pounds, which all of us were kind of shocked because he looks like 200, 210, not in a bad way. Like, he's just an imposing guy on the outside. He can get vertical. He can change directions. There's a play from his senior highlights that I kind of love. And I got to give credit to Eric Richards, director of the All-American Bowl. We needed a wide receiver. I'd kind of given him a list of names, and he's like, well, what about Jordan Shipp? Dug back into it, and he catches this pass from Jaden Davis. I don't know if it's in the playoffs or the state title game. It's one of the playoff games. I can't remember which one exactly. He goes up, catches it on a ladder, and then just spins away from the DB and gets into the end zone. And I'm like, yep, I'm on board with that. Like, he's an explosive cat for his size, and I think what stands out is he gets into the end zone, right? So he's produced and he gets into the end zone. Past 3 seasons, 173 catches, just under 3,000 yards, 37 touchdowns, 16.9 yards per catch. Yeah, we're big fans. And I think he's someone that could play year one for North Carolina. Now, I know some guys are coming back for UNC, but I asked someone in Chapel Hill after he was kind of there day one, someone I know, I was like, hey, man, Jordan Shipp. And he's like, yeah, I'm under the impression when he practiced, he kind of exceeded the Tar Heels' expectations in terms of where he was at, as a high school freshman there going through the bowl practices. So he was awesome. Glad we got him into the game. And yeah, he's going to be a guy that we move up in the rankings.
Tom,
there you go, Don. No, there you go, Don. Don's president of the Shipp fan club. It's always one guy every year. And
that's
Don,
my guy for this year.
Real quick, Andrew, let me ask you for the last question. We'll let you get out of here. The impact of the transfer portal on high school recruiting from your perspective.
Oh man, it's changed everything. I think when you go through our rankings, right? There are kids that are going to are we still calling them group of 5 programs? I don't know where we're at now. It's like this kid in previous years would not be going there. So that stands out. Like that's kind of like the short term. The other thing is just how accelerated all this has become. And, we're going to get it. I keep telling our guys, I'm like, hey, like, be ready to go on 2025, because after everyone catches their breath from this transfer portal, it's going to be full go, with the junior days, locking up commitments. And most of these schools want to have their recruiting classes in place by the time they start fall camp. And it's like signing day, it's still an important day on the calendar, but really the most active kind of time period has been right around July 4th. Right then we get so many commitments because kids are coming off the summer visits. And we entered, I think the month of December, 93% of our top 247 was committed. I mean, there really wasn't a ton of drama. I have my thoughts on this. We've kind of essentially eliminated the senior evaluation, which I kind of question. A lot of these guys can take steps forward, and I think a lot of guys can take their foot off the pedal, and then they show up to these colleges, and the schools are like, well, hey, you're not really what we thought you were, but guess what? We can move off you because roster movement is free. We can put you in the transfer portal. So I just think with the current setup and the ability for kids to transfer without having to sit out, and now you can transfer multiple schools, it's only fueling this whole thing, right? You want to get, we're taking kids based off of junior seasons. We're not seeing what they do as seniors. Then we can kick them out, and now we want to go in the portal and grab someone. So, it's certainly been interesting what the transfer portal has done, and I think everyone is still trying to figure it out. With that being said, I mean, we saw the national title game on Monday night. You look at Michigan and Washington; those teams had a combined, I think, 9 transfer starters. It wasn't a ton, and they had a lot of high school players make big plays at key moments. So for me, I think the transfer portal, it's still, I view it as free agency, right? I mean, you can build a winner through free agency, but those teams contending for the Super Bowl, they're still hitting on their 5th, 6th, 7th round draft picks. And those 5th, 6th, 7th round draft picks, those are high school recruits. I think you look at high school recruiting like the NFL draft. So you got to find that balance and build it through the high school ranks.
A great answer there, and I 100% agree with all of what you were talking about there. And it also builds the program, and you don't see well, it was just an interesting dynamic, we'll say, with Florida State. Once they didn't get where they wanted to go, what happened to that program after that? Andrew Ivins, Director of Scouting from 24/7 Sports. Always a great listen, always a great guest. Don lined it up. Andrew, appreciate you joining us, my man.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Don, I'm sure I'll see you soon. Appreciate it.
We will. We'll see each other soon.
That is Andrew. We are back. I'm going to talk about Johnny T-Shirt, johnnytshirt.com right now, because I missed the 30-minute section because we had such a great guest. They are, of course, great friends of Inside Carolina, great friends of you, the Inside Carolina Premium subscriber. Don Callahan needs to shop at Johnny T-Shirt. He needs to shop at there and get rid of that Phillies stuff.
No.
And
I do shop there.
And we need to get Don on the Johnny T-Shirt train on the show so he can be a model for us. But anyway, if you're a premium subscriber, you get 10% off. And shop local, shop alumni owned and operated on Franklin Street. And if you can't get there, you go to johnnytshirt.com. National guys pay the bills right quick. We'll come back. More Noon Dish. Might be a long one today. We'll see. Don, we are back. It's the Noon Dish. It's about 12 minutes to the hour. 105 people here. Shout out to everybody in there. Andrew Ivins is great. Let me ask you a question. Do you look up to him? Is he like life goals for Don Callahan, being a national guy?
No. And that's nothing against Andrew. Andrew is I love my gig with Inside Carolina because of I have a great work-life balance. I don't know Andrew's work-life balance. I know he has a family and all that sort of stuff. But he travels a lot. That's not something that interests me all that much. I like traveling, but I'm more of a homebody. But I mean, you could just look at what his December and early January look like as far as traveling. And, I don't know if I could deal with that for a long period of time. So kudos to Andrew for what he does. And, him and I will see each other probably off the top of my head, Under Armour All-American camps. He's usually at the one in Atlanta. I'm probably going to be there. And so we'll bump each other there. And I'm sure there's some other stops. But, yeah, he's all over the place. I don't have any interest in that. So, and I can't take Buck and Ben with me. So I got to stay here.
Well, to Preston's comment, is Don the best local evaluator? Well, of course, because he's always here. He's
there's
always
no other
local.
competition.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I didn't say that. I didn't. You didn't have to bring that into the factor. Nobody has to know that. But Don Callahan, great get on Andrew Ivins. Appreciate him joining us. I mean, he had 30 minutes. He spent about 35 answering that question. It's interesting though, and it goes to you as well. Even though you cover the portal extensively, is like the transfer portal sort of infringing on these guys' business.
Yeah.
They cover the high school, and it was an interesting question, and I knew he had to get out of there, but I didn't ask him. Is that James Pruitt asked this, and I'll ask it to you, Don, because you're qualified. With the portal, do you get high school athletes waiting to the very last minute to sign on what college they are planning to attend? I don't think that the portal is affected when
No.
kids commit at all or sign.
No, I mean, if you saw with North Carolina's class this past year, and really the past couple of years, the majority of the eventual signees are committed by the end of the summer. There are a couple exceptions. North Carolina needed to get another defensive lineman, so that was that they had to kind of pursue that. That was the only addition that they made in the fall. And it's just with the sped up calendar. Andrew touched on this a little bit with the fact that, senior season evaluations are basically out the window, at least for the Power 5 level. And it's unfortunate because we're dealing with high school boys who mature at different rates. And if you're playing behind, we talked about now, Ashton Woods is a kid who I think he's a 3-year star at Walton, which is uncommon at that school. But a lot of those big powerhouse schools in the Atlanta area, those guys have to kind of wait their turn. And if your turn happens to be your senior year, then unless something falls for you, that kind of works out, you're probably not going to go to a Power 5 school.
Yeah.
So, and that's unfortunate.
But the thing about the portal is that now
you eventually end up there.
Yeah, I mean, we had that discussion that portal was taking place and ruining opportunities for young people at a high school because you might give a scholarship to a portal guy rather than give a scholarship to a high school kid. Well, now those those young men can go to a lesser, quote unquote, lesser school, G5, whatever we want to call them, even FCS, and have the opportunity, if they're good enough, to bounce up to the P5 or the P2 level. And so it's sort of a give and take there. And like I mentioned before we had Andrew on, it was almost like you want to get a portal guy because if you get a portal guy, he's stuck. And you don't have to promise him or give him things or he'll leave like you do with initial counters. But now with the free transfer portal, it is kind of what it is. And Mark Kenton says in the chat, recruiting is 365. And Don,
it's been 365 for a very long time.
That's
the reason why I've had a full-time job doing this for 20 years, whatever it's been.
Oh, yeah.
It's been 360. Now it has changed, as far as, there was a time where it would slow down a little bit. But I mean, and usually, I don't know, 10 years ago, whatever it was, this would be a really big time because we would be having January official visits that, kids who are still uncommitted before making a decision on real signing day, which is
February 3rd or whatever.
Yeah, the first Wednesday in February. That's not the case. So it has so right now it's slowed down a tad for me. We'll have some there'll be some visits, this month, and then we have a dead period in February, so we'll slow down again, which is nice. But yeah, it's been 365 for 2 decades. It's just a matter of just where the busy times are and that sort of thing have kind of changed a little bit through the years.
Yeah, it's kind of like, people think Don's not doing anything. It's kind of like the duck. You see the duck on top of the water, he's nice and calm. Underneath the water, those feet are going like crazy, and Don is the duck feet. Let me not to be confused with duck lips, thank God. Turner Whitfield asks, any chance the defensive side letter of intent guys want to be released after the staff changes?
He changed it and he said it should be NIL.
So, no, it's NLI, National Letter of Intent. Letter of intent.
Okay. Okay. NLI. Okay. Any chance any signee on the defense? I am not aware of that. That would I don't want to say surprise me. I don't anticipate that, I guess I should say.
Good deal.
I don't get surprised. In general, I don't get surprised by recruiting stuff because I've been doing this long enough to know that unpredictable things happen all the time.
It's the craziest thing you've ever seen happen. Was the
It might have been our guy we had on.
Yeah.
I mean,
never again and never to be
I'm like
renamed.
forgetting his name now.
I know his name, but I'm not mentioning it because we don't
say
do
his
that.
name so I can at least
Double Gus Bus.
Gus Ritchie. Yes, that was the strangest, only because it was his idea. And no, I'm not saying this conspiracy. He tried to do this against North Carolina. I don't want to. Yeah, that's from what I know of Gus, and I've had lots of conversations with Gus because anyone who's met Gus has had a long conversation because that's just the nature. He, made a foolish decision with how he handled things and tried to, anyway.
It is what it is.
Yes.
And I don't think Carolina will be hurting on the recruiting.
We talked
the
about
tight
it
end.
a little bit, I won't even go there with the other thing. But yeah, I mean, that was a little bit surprising because it was completely his idea. And he had his family there. He had his trainer there, who, by the way, the last time I saw Coach Andre Purvis, which was during the football season, so it's been a while, but he had told me he had not spoken to Gus since then. And it's not his doing. Gus just hadn't reached out to him, had stopped training with him and all that sort of stuff. I think Gus felt a little bit embarrassed with how everything went down.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of is what it is. One thing that I was taught long ago, never burn the bridge that you may have to cross later.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how that plays into recruiting. It's also never step on the toes of the ass you might have to kiss later. Different variations of that, but I digress. Are we ready to go to top 5?
Yeah. Do we have any other? I see there's a couple of questions. Do you want to?
Can you not star the questions in there?
I cannot. I think I need to be logged. We got to figure this out one day. I think I need to be logged in. I don't know. We could talk about this off air because nobody else, I think, cares about this conversation besides you and I.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would love for you to have the ability to star them, so we're going to figure that out. Because I see them and I just I don't see a ton of questions.
There's one, just
Thomas Yancey.
Yeah.
Jeff Collins as a rep is a great evaluator of talent. Can you comment on that and comment on any recruiting acumen? You mentioned it in the scoop, so I don't want to spoil the scoop.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil the scoop, but yeah, I mean, there were definitely I could have spent a lot of time on this, but I didn't have a whole lot of time because, and I've mentioned this before. I mean, I don't write the weekly scoop on Tuesday morning just because it gets posted on morning, afternoonish. The weekly scoop is
it's a weekly thing. It's a weekly work effort.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a full week. I probably start really working on a Thursday, Friday sort of thing, but I wasn't afforded all of that because the transfer portal we had this past weekend, which was an open window for visits. So I was dealing with a lot of that stuff. And for those who were kind of following the twists and turns with that, there were going to be 3 official visitors and there were 2, and there was potentially going to be another, and then this, and there was a guy who kind of visited, and it was nuts with how everything was changing. So I was really busy and didn't get to spend as much time as I would have liked to and dig as much as I would have liked to with Jeff Collins. And, but just a little bit that I was looking into of that. You look at some of the guys he brought in at Georgia Tech was, pretty impressive considering what they ended up doing as far as, the NFL and in the transfer portal and that sort of thing. There's a lineman now that North Carolina recently offered, transferring out of Georgia Tech, so, he did some good things there at Florida. Looking at what he did in Florida was pretty impressive. He was only there for 2 seasons, and I think he signed 4 blue chip recruits, which is pretty significant for a defensive coordinator. And these were recruits from Florida, from Georgia, from Alabama. But then also there were a few non-blue chip guys who end up being solid players for Florida also. So I think I'm really interested to kind of follow Collins as a recruiter at North Carolina.
It'll be interesting. It's going to be different, for sure.
And it's something that North Carolina really has missed because, I think people are starting to realize now that when Jay Bateman was on staff, he really kind of plugged a lot of holes as a recruiter for UNC on the defensive side. And I think Collins will kind of fit a similar role, because if you also look back on Collins as a recruiter, I mean, he actually, his best player they brought into Mississippi State was a running back. He brought in several different positions when he was at Florida. So this is a guy who is not strictly, his main thing is edge rushers and outside linebackers and that sort of thing, but he definitely can recruit every position. Super likable guy. I mentioned Brother Bob in the weekly scoop. I don't know if you caught that, Tommy, but immediately I got a text message from our brother about just Collins' time at Temple and just the impression that he kind of made there in just 2 years, because of the brand he kind of brings. And that sort of stuff helps with recruiting. Kids like that sort of weird stuff, like you drink Diet Mountain Dew. I don't know what it is, a case a day or whatever craziness it is. So
Yeah,
I think it's going to be fun following him as a recruiter.
I saw your reference to Brother Bob, and I was like, if he's anything like you,
he is not. I mean,
look at you beaming. Look at you beaming, talking about Brother Bob. It's impressive.
Brother Bob is something to be proud of. He's different than me, but obviously we're similar.
Let's talk.
We used to share a bed. It was a bunk bed.
I was going to say, let's get to the top 5 here. We're not going into some old off the rails stuff. I'll start with Preston, Greensboro. Top 5 things you'll do now that college football season is over. Watch all of my podcasts. Well, pretty boring life, my man, but I do appreciate it.
And you're telling me I should be watching your podcast.
Well, I mean, you should, because you work with me, and you should know what we're saying on the other stuff. Watch UNC basketball. I can hear that. Drink more beer at Hooters. I can see that. Online shop at Johnny T-Shirt. Checking all the bingo boxes. And Don's favorite, finally have time to binge watch Swiping America.
Oh. Did you finish that?
I watched it.
Okay. It was I mean, if you don't like dating shows or whatever, it's not going to be your cup of tea. But it was a different sort of spin on the dating show idea.
It was interesting, and
although I feel like it didn't have a conclusion, which is probably realistic. But
I guess is there season 2 coming up there, update or whatever. Yeah, it was interesting. I did watch it all, though, I will admit. Eric Rust, get ready for baseball. That is absolutely correct. I feel you there. Don's
I know you're a baseball fan, but so do you have a team, or what do you do? Do you just watch
like pro baseball?
Yeah, pro baseball.
I mean, if I had to pick a team, it's going to be Atlanta because they're pretty close.
Okay.
Washington's fairly close too, but they're terrible.
So you don't really have a team, but I know you're a baseball fan.
A what fan?
A baseball fan.
I love baseball.
Watch college baseball.
I love college baseball. I love going to baseball.
Okay.
I'll watch all the playoffs and the pros, but I won't watch much regular season pro baseball. But I'll watch college, and I, of course, cover the Carolina beat as much as possible for Inside Carolina, while Adam and those guys are wrapped up in spring ball, and then sort of keep that going on the Inside Carolina baseball message board, the Diamond Hills baseball message board. So that was there. James Pruitt, since college football is over, college basketball, go Heels. Are you a college basketball person?
I used to get really big into the March Madness and the tournament and stuff like that. I think really a lot of my viewing habits have kind of changed since COVID, but yeah, we'll see. Maybe I'll get back. And also I got so heavily into gambling.
I was going to say, are you one of those, and I think somebody posted the article on the message boards about the Gen Z, and I know you're not Gen Z, but are you more of, I pay attention because I bet on something, sports fan?
Yes and no. I guess I'm slowly starting to turn into that.
Like,
I mean, that's why I love MMA. I feel like it's the best sport to gamble on. If you enjoy gambling, it's the best sport to gamble on.
MMA, when one person can land a sucker punch,
exactly,
and there's no science to it.
Yes, because there is science to it. Once you watch it,
everybody gets caught.
Yeah, but we got to have you come over.
I just don't get into it. I love boxing. But I do not like MMA.
I grew up a big boxing fan. I cannot watch boxing now because I feel like it's too slow. And then when they start to clinch each other in MMA, when they start to clinch each other, the game just changed.
I don't like it because you can get caught and it's over.
Yeah,
Everybody, even the best martial arts, MMA, whatever, those type fighters, the best one can get caught by not a sucker punch or a cheap shot, but just a haymaker and it's over.
You're absolutely right. But the longer the match goes in, the less power you have, so less likely that happens. And also, if you've ever taken any sort of boxing classes or imagine any sort of martial arts classes, the thing that they hammer first and foremost is defense more than anything else. So you are supposed to be trained on not taking that punch. But the other element to MMA is also, if you're not smart and you're going against someone who is in jiu-jitsu, they can get you quickly in a hold and it's over.
And I'm not a fan, and we're going to move off of this because we're losing viewers talking about MMA garbage. I don't like beating somebody when they're on the ground. I mean, man up. Let's step up, straight up, toe-to-toe.
Don't allow it to get to the ground.
Not beat somebody when they're on the ground. It just seems like it just doesn't seem good to me, and I hate it. I don't like seeing that. Sean Crawley says, watch.
Come over.
You're going to have a lot of refreshments. Watch college basketball, more college basketball. Watch IC podcasts, go on vacation, watch baseball, get ready for college football. Sean Crawley needs to be wrapped up in IC swag. That man is got to be.
I think I'm going to make breadcrumbs of, what's your favorite beer?
I don't really have one. I'll drink whatever you got.
Okay. Breadcrumbs from Clayton to Holly Springs, leading to my house.
I'll drink an IPA, but they're too heavy. I'll drink some.
So you do light beer?
Give me a light beer, local brewery light beers, stuff we can get to. IPAs are just too heavy. You got to keep up the fit, man. I got the Jim Holland, college basketball first, then college lacrosse, and then baseball. Them college lacrosse, them folks tough now. They tough and crazy. You whack each other with a stick. I mean, I would just be ready to drop gloves and let's go. You hit me in the face with that stick, we're going. I digress. Last question for the noon dish, and before I talk about it.
Would you have your top 5?
I will, but I'm going to say congruity is my top 5 right now because they've got 5 reasons why you need to be a smaller business owner using congruity. What are they, Don? Customer service. Technology. They do all the heavy lifting with payroll and HR while you grow your business. So they take care of your people, they grow your business. They're a national-based company that started out as a local-based company, and they have transformed themselves into a national company, which is exactly what they can do for you. And the 5th thing, they transfer them. They're obsessed with customer service, the technology, the empowering, the North Carolina base, but they give Inside Carolina watchers and viewers a free assessment. Go to congruityhr.com/Tar Heels. Fill out the form. They'll connect you with someone. They can give you a free assessment. Do it. If you're a business owner, do this. See what they've got to offer, and they will take care of you. Last thing. I had it right here. Preston. Give you the last questions. Are you concerned for the future of college or of all-star games and bowl games with all the opt-outs? Don. And I asked it to Andrew, and he talked about how it took them a while to get players because they had to deal with this. But are you personally concerned with the future of this type stuff, whether it's high school all-star games or college bowl games?
Yes, but I think these things will evolve somehow. Because I think, obviously, I had to constantly remind myself that these games were on. As I mentioned, I was going down to Spartanburg for 20 years and haven't been in the last few years because it's just not, I don't get as much out of it from a work standpoint as I used to. I have gone to the Under Armour. I've gone to both the Under Armour and the All-American Bowl. But it's not beneficial for me. But even from watching it standpoint, they had the Under Armour game on. I think it was 4:00 on a Wednesday, which is so strange. They had the the All-American was on is I guess his normal time or whatever. But I just don't. I think once the TV stations start to realize that these things are not getting the viewers that they used to, I think they're going to change some things. I don't know if fans. I don't know if the opt-outs matter that much. I just think the interest is kind of waning in those things because of just the way the recruiting calendar has kind of sped up so much. And we've been trending this way before the NIL stuff.
Yeah, let me ask you this as far as that before we get out of here. When it used to be a huge deal, people were selected for these All-American Bowls or the Under Armour Bowl and all. They'd have jersey ceremonies and all that kind of stuff. When you opt out or when you are already on a college campus and you don't want to do this, is it still a big deal for these kids to get selected?
Well, so there were a couple kids, and Rosinski was one of them, who was actually at North Carolina, and I believe he received the call when he was in Chapel Hill, and so he was permitted to go to San Antonio. So for some of these kids, it does matter, but I think some of the big time players who have 2 million followers already on Twitter, maybe it doesn't matter that much, or maybe they value more. I don't know. I know you hate case by case, but I think it matters to some kids. Clearly to Rosinski, clearly to Jordan Shipp, because those guys were at it at the last minute and went down there and performed great. So yeah, but you and I haven't given our top 5.
Give your top 5 for us to get out of here. What do I do now that college football season is over?
What do you do?
Inside Carolina podcasts repeatedly, post games, noon dish with Don. Carolina baseball is coming up. Gonna start doing that. Start talking to Coach Forbes on a weekly basis. Talk to the players on a weekly basis. Do articles. Hopefully get a vacation of some sort. Get away. I think we're trying to do Yellowstone. So if anybody's watching this and has some Yellowstone tips or some hookups, let me know, because that's going to be the family trip. And then get to the beach, get some salt water, and get some fishing in.
And notice that visit the Man Tower was not on your list.
The Man Tower has been accomplished on December the 20th. Dude, we talked for 5 hours straight.
It was beautiful. We need to make it happen again.
I wonder how many people actually watched it from the very beginning to the very end.
That I would be interested in that.
What's your top 5 before we can get out of here?
All right, top 5. I'm now going back to more high schools. I wasn't able to do because it was more transfer portal and all that other stuff. So I am actually making a couple of visits in Charlotte tomorrow. So that's the one thing. Binge watching. I haven't done a whole lot of binge watching during the football season. I'll get back onto that. So maybe we need to have a top 5 television show next week so we can get some show ideas.
And they have to be new shows.
New shows, yeah.
No, like talking about Breaking Bad again, because I'm watching Reacher, Monarch, and I just started Fool Me Once.
Okay. The other, let's see. Yes, I'm trying to think of where I'm at. More time with family. I've been neglecting them. The other sports. MMA I always make time for, but obviously we'll get more time. Hockey, I've been making time for, but it has kind of fallen by the wayside sometimes. But Flyers they should make the playoffs. They're playing much better than their talent, which is great. And then the Phillies will be, I think it's like a month or so, or it's almost a month away from spring training. Pitchers and catchers reporting. And then my number 1 honey-do list, which I've already kind of started.
100%.
I had to fix my my gas fireplace over the weekend. Finally did that. I have some stuff already on the list for this weekend. So yeah, I can no longer say this is my job. I have got to watch college football from noon until 1 a.m. when the Hawaii game is over. I can no longer say that.
Well, please don't let me watch the house that exploded in Holly Springs because you're messing with gas lines.
Well, we've already passed that, so we're good now.
Okay, because, it happens. There's 2 things I will not touch. I will not mess with electrical, and I will not mess with gas-related stuff. So let the professionals do that.
I'm definitely scared of gas. So I turned that off. I made sure I was sniffing the entire time. Electrical, I don't worry so much because you just turn off the power, and you're usually pretty good.
All right. Well, anyway. Jim Holland in the chat. Hit me up, Tommy at InsideCarolina.com. Send me an email. We are done. It's an hour and 15 minutes in. It has been a fun show. Shout out to Andrew Ivins for joining us. Great content. If you did not hear Andrew, go back and watch that again. This will be on the pod feed soon enough. Don Callahan, always shout out as a great co-host. I'm Tommy Ashley, and shout out to Johnny T-Shirt, Congruity, and all the folks that have taken time out of their day to join the Noon Dish. Thank you, Don.
Thank you, Tommy.